Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Community Marriage Initiative Fund's monthly training event. My name is Katie Ray. I'm with Marriage Initiative, and I have the privilege of working closely with our amazing CMI teams across the U.S. as you guys connect with churches and other marriage leaders in your community, really in an effort to serve couples with intentional purpose. As always, I'd like to thank you all for joining us here today. I know Friday can be busy for all of us, so thank you guys for taking the hour to spend with us. And before we begin today, we will have our very own Carl Caton with Marriage Initiative, and he will be opening us up in prayer. Carl, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. It's great to be with you all. Let's pray together, friends. Heavenly Father, we just come before you, thanking you and praising you that you are mightily at work around this country, in our various cities. You are actively about the business of redeeming and restoring marriages. And we thank you that as a good father, you invite us into this work, a very exciting work where we get to see you powerfully moving around us. And even today, Lord, as Dennis shares from the incredible gifts and experiences that you've given him, I pray that you will just bless and anoint his thoughts and mind, and let him reveal and share some of the many things that he has learned about this important part of our work. And so just guide our conversation. May your Holy Spirit be with us and then dwell in us and speak in and through each of us. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you, Carl. And if you guys looked at the agenda, you may have noticed that today's a little bit different. Our agenda was short and sweet in terms of the number of guest speakers we have today, but I promise you that you will leave here today with more knowledge than you thought you could gain in an hour. Dennis Stoica, who we know as the founder and one of the funders of our CMI fund, and really one of the most respected leaders in the relationship and marriage education field, is going to be providing part A, I believe. I think there's going to be one following it eventually, a 1-hour training on applied grant writing. And our hope is that you guys will leave here today feeling more confident in your ability to write a successful grant application. So without further ado, Dennis, whenever you're ready.
Yeah. So have you given me permission to share?
I have, yes.
Super. Thank you. Super. Let's see. Let's do this. Share. Perfect. Super. All right. So first piece of information is that Katie, I just forwarded to you a copy of the PDF with handouts. And so if you would be so kind as to go ahead and forward that to the people that are on the call, and just the people that are on the call. And so your reward for joining this live is you actually get the handout. And why that's important is there's a ton of material in the handout that we're going to go through. And, one of my good friends, Julie Baumgartner, and I once did a plenary presentation called Tools of the Trade at a Smart Marriages conference. Had to be 15 years ago or so, roughly. And she started off, she said something like this. She says, man, I got a lot of material to cover today, but I'm going to be talking really fast. You guys need to listen really fast. And ever since then, I've spoken really fast. So you can blame it on her. So be prepared to listen really fast. But most of the material that I cover is actually going to be on the handout. And so I did this on purpose so that you'll be able to take the handout and use it as a resource, hopefully for years to come. So that's going to be passing. Now, anything we do, we have to start with a disclaimer. So here's the disclaimer. This webinar is provided as a service by the CMA Fund. All statements made are the opinions of the presenters who have no association with any government agency. All applications for any grant program must meet the requirements of the applicable Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO, or Funding Opportunity Announcement, FOA. If anything presented today conflicts with the information in the NOFO/FOA, applicants should follow the NOFO/FOA directions. All right. How's that for enough of a disclaimer? There you go. All right. So I'm going to start, and we're going to cover 21 different tips and hints and instructions for actually writing, and again, the title is How to Write a Successful Grant Application. And that's the game we're playing here today. Now, I'm going to actually stop sharing for a sec, and we'll get back to this. So there, let me see. How do I go into gallery mode? There we go. Super. All right. So there's basically 3 groups of people that are on the call today. One group that represents 9 organizations are the 9 organizations that have already received funding from the CMI fund. And by the way, up until a week ago, that was 8 organizations, but we have unofficially approved another one, and that's our good friends from Tulsa. Not sure. I don't think I see Frank. Frank, if you're here, wave. Frank may not be with us, but he'll be getting on the recording. So that's one group, is the 9 groups that are have been funded. There are a number of people on the call from Live the Life, and that is one of our funded organizations. As I mentioned before, we just added Oklahoma, so that's one group. Another group of people there are 4 other organizations, I believe, 3 or 4, that have applications pending. Yeah, I think it's 4. Yeah, it is 4 applications that are pending. 2 of them were submitted last round and have resubmitted, and then there's 2 other organizations that have submitted for the first time. So those 4 applications have not yet been reviewed. My guess is that some of them will probably get funded this time around, and some may not. So there are 4 organizations that fall in that category. And then there are other organizations on the Zoom call that have not yet applied for funding from the CMI fund. And so I'm going to really try to be speaking to really all 3 groups. We're going to be using, so Katie actually sent out email to you some fun reading material yesterday, a nice 72-page document of light reading material of Notice a Funding Opportunity called Advancing Equity in Adolescent Health Through Evidence-Based Teen Pregnancy Prevention Programs and Services. And what I want everybody to know is that those 9 organizations that have already received funding from the Community Marriage Initiative Fund have actually been invited to participate in the world-famous, second of its kind, Dennis Stoica Grant Writing Bootcamp. And the first time it was done was back in 2006, when the first round of federal healthy marriage grants were released. And at that point, we reached out to 5 organizations that I thought were strategic and invited them to participate in the first iteration of that grant writing bootcamp. And one of the star graduates of that is, of course, Richard Albertson, who has really taken it to heart. And in an earlier email, I think I shared for you, is that before going through the grant writing bootcamp, he was 0 for 8 out of federal and state applications, and that since then he is now 13 out of 15 for the time period after. So he is an example of somebody who really mastered the material, that took it in and has applied it and applies it on a natural basis. I've been so impressed with his learning of it that I decided to move to Florida just so I could work with him. Okay, well, that may not be entirely true. Those were independent decisions, but I do get the pleasure of working with him. And Richard and I are just a phenomenal grant writing team. But he uses the stuff that we're going to be going over today. And those of you that have received funding have that opportunity to participate again in that grant writing bootcamp, and your life will never be the same as a result of doing that. So anyway, others of you that will be applying for the CMI fund application in the future, or considering it, will be able to use this grant writing training to help you apply for that. And if you're in the middle ground, then you'll listen to this and learn what it is you did wrong on the application you submitted last week. Anyway, it should be a positive learning experience for everybody. That's my goal. All right. So as I mentioned, so we're going to be using this NOFO as kind of a case study. So we're going to be, as we're going through the 21 points, we'll be referring to it. By the way, guys, we did the kickoff meeting for this boot camp the day before yesterday, and during the boot camp, so prior to the boot camp, I assigned 28 specific pages to read before Wednesday's meeting. And at Wednesday's meeting, I assigned the rest. And so between Wednesday and Friday, all of you have hopefully read the entire notice of funding opportunity, and you'll get a chance to show off. Because at various times during this thing, I'll say, okay, guys, where can we find this information in the NOFO? And then 9 of you organizations, well, Jerry, you're making me dizzy. Your side, oh, there, whew, whew. And especially with the bridge behind you, Jerry, I was just really vertigo. there.
Sorry, I
So-
was checking the chat on there.
Okay, that's okay. So those 9 of you will have a chance to see how well you mastered this. Now, as a hint, I do want to point out that on page 3 of 72 is this magic thing called table of contents. And so when I ask for a particular piece of information, you might want to look there first as a direction, but you don't have to. I mean, because I know that some of you have already memorized the entire 72 pages. I know that. So you won't have to refer to it. So we're going to jump in to the 21-point guideline on how to write a successful grant application. So we're going to share screen again. Share screen. And what I discovered is that if I take up the full screen, then I cannot see any of you. And then it feels like I'm just like talking to myself, which is just strange. So I'm doing it this way just so I can see you on the right side. So that's why it's not a traditional format. All right. So how to write a successful application. We've been through the disclaimer. We're just going to jump in. So, and again, hopefully, Katie, have these been emailed off to everybody on the call? Is that a fair statement? Katie, you're muted.
Sorry. I've mailed it to everyone that I have their email address. There are a couple that I don't have, and I messaged those individuals. So I'm just waiting for them to reply with their email address.
Super. So if you check your email and you don't find it, then that means Katie probably doesn't have your email address. And I'd suggest sending her and you can just,
They're coming
chat
in.
to
Thank
her.
you.
Chat her. Perfect. All right, good. Just want to make sure that was in sync. All right. So again, we're going to run through 21 points on it. And I've got 47 minutes. So that means I get basically 2 minutes per item. Just as a proviso, really want to wrap this in the hour time frame. But then at the end of the hour, I'm requesting that all 9 of the funded applications who were invited to participate in the grant writing bootcamp leave this Zoom call and jump on the Zoom link that was our last meeting on Wednesday. So at 1 o'clock Central Time, we'll disconnect for this, and all those grantees shoot over the new one for individualized question and answers. All right, super. All right, starting. Point number 1. There are 2 important qualities of a high quality grant application. Another way to define high quality means likely to be funded. So there's 2 characteristics of a grant application that's likely to be funded. Number 1, it's got to be a well-designed project and intervention. Something that you're excited about, and something that the funder is likely to be excited about. So that's step 1. You got to have a really well-designed project. And the second is you got to have a well-written application. But my next point is a very low percentage of grant applications contain both. As I've reviewed applications, I've seen some well-designed projects that did not get written up well. And I've read applications for people that have really answered the questions correctly on a poorly designed intervention. Neither of those have a particularly high probability of funding. Where you have a high probability of funding is if you design a really great project or intervention and then use the technicalities of how to write a successful grant application to really present it in the best way to get maximum funding. That's the game we're playing here. A great project written up well. All right, point number 2. The most important thing in doing a grant application is in the very next sentence. And it says, understand the funding announcement or the notice of funding opportunity. I'm going to refer to it here as funding announcement. It's just fewer words than notice of funding opportunity. It's the same thing. Sometimes I have an AKA, also known as an RFP. Okay, they're all the same thing. So number one, just understand it and then give them what they're asking for in that RFP. I'm just going to refer to it as an RFP. It's just easier to refer to. And then, as you can see, that could be the most important point you'll ever hear about grant writing. And it's pretty basic, is understand the RFP, give them what they're asking in it. Point number two, the overall process of writing grant applications is actually quite a bit easier than it seems because, generally speaking, notice everything in caps. Everything you need to know is in the funding announcement. It's all here in these 72 pages. Therefore, the most important thing you can do is literally become an expert on the funding announcement. I mean, you need to read this thing over and over and parse the words and understand, what do they mean by this? What do they mean by that? And the biggest mistake that people make is they don't spend enough time becoming a master of the funding announcement, and so they leave off details, or they read it too quickly and they think they said, or they go, well, I thought they meant this. No, that's not what they said. So, I mean, it's like you've got to be, well, you do have to become an expert on the funding announcement. Point number three, while becoming an expert on it, you want to get into the world of the author of the funding announcement. So one of the skills we teach in many marriage education programs is a skill called empathy. And you've heard it said is learn to walk in somebody else's shoes or walk in somebody else's skin. Get into their world. And this is critically important. You see, we spend too much time oftentimes in preparing a grant application worrying about what we want or what our universe looks like or what our constituents need. You need to spend at least an equal time understanding the funder. And that first bullet is understand what it is that they're trying to accomplish. Understand what they're looking for, and then deliver it. And where excellent grant projects come from is when you really understand your world and you really understand the funder's world, and you develop a project that maximizes the value of that intersection. And one of the biggest mistakes that many grant applicants do is they don't bother trying to really understand what the funder is trying to accomplish. That's a huge rookie mistake. So that's the first point. Understand what it is they're really looking for and then deliver it. And so quote I have is just give them what they're asking for. But the second part's equally as important. Make it easy for them to find it. See, in this particular grant application, we have 50 pages of narrative that we'll be providing. And you're going to have really volunteer grant reviewers that are reviewing the application. And what they're going to have is they're going to have the scoring criteria. They're going to have a scoring sheet with the scoring criteria, and they're going to have your application. And they'll have the criteria sitting right there, and they'll look at one criteria, and they'll look at your application. And it's basically a search and find. They're looking for each item sequentially, and they're looking for it, and they say, okay, does this answer the question? Yes, it does. Okay, award points. That's it. It's that easy. But you've got to make it easy for them to find it. So a rookie mistake that people make is to say, well, I've answered all the questions somewhere, and I'm sure that a reviewer will find it. No, they won't. No, they won't. You have to spoon feed it to them, making it real easy for them to find it. You will not believe the number of times I've heard people that have gotten back their scoring sheet with the comments from the reviewer, and they go, well, that's not fair. I answered that question. Too bad. You may have answered the question, but you didn't make it easy for them to find it. And if they can't find it, you won't get points for it. You won't get funded. All right, so make it easy for them to find it. In order to do that, you may want to consider organizing your narrative in the order of their criteria sections. Now, Sometimes they'll actually require it. Sometimes they'll actually say, give it to us in this order. My comment is you may not have to. Now, what I mean by that, you may not have to. There are often, usually 5 or 6 major sections in the scoring criteria. You do have the freedom to oftentimes you have the freedom to organize the order that you present them in a different order than they're asked for, if it's strategically important for you to do that. Okay. And so, for example, in some of the Healthy Marriage Grant applications, there's a section called organizational capacity. Well, a new organization may not want to lead with that. And so they may want to move that to a later point. In this particular grant application for TPP1, I'm sorry, no, TPP, this is TPP2, actually. Well, let's just call it TPP. They've organized in a way that I think makes perfectly logical sense to provide it in the order of the criteria. And now within the order of the criteria, so you can say within each major section, you must, if you want to get full points, provide the information in the order that the information is asked for. And then I do say within reason and when practical. So I mean, use your brain on it, but usually keeping it in that order, because they're going to have the score sheet. The score sheet's going to be in order of the criteria, and they're just going to be walking their way looking for it. And that brings up the next point: is use signposts. Use signposts the reviewers will easily recognize. So the first point on that is start sentences with keywords or phrases pulled exactly from the criteria. And then you may want to consider bolding or underlining those keywords or phrases. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to refer to the first part of the criteria. So can somebody that is in the grant writing bootcamp tell me what page does the scoring criteria start on? By the way, you'll have to unmute yourself.
40.
You don't have to raise your hand, just what?
43.
43, exactly. So everybody turn to 43 in the document, please. Turn to the page. Super. Somebody read for me the very first bullet somebody read for me what is the title of that first section, and then read the first bullet under it. Go ahead and raise your virtual hand and I'll call on you for that. Am I wrong? I thought if somebody raised a virtual hand, they would come to the front. Did anybody raise their hand? Anna, go ahead. What's the subject? What's the bullet thing?
Application review information, and number 1 under the letter E is criteria.
Keep reading. What does A say?
A, focus on areas of greatest need and disparities, and it gives you the points value. And
Perfect.
as you read on the subcategories.
So hold on before you go there. So A is focus on areas of greatest need and disparity. So we're in the criteria section, all right? And so we see the letter A. And then if we flip, we'll see the letter B, and then we'll see C, and then D, and then E, and then F and G. And so what that tells us is, oh, you know what? They probably want 7 sections in their application. All right. So that's the way we're going to structure it. So the first part of the criteria. So the next sentence is federal staff and an independent review panel will assess all eligible applications according to the following criteria. Disqualified applications will not be reviewed against these criteria. All right. And so, Anna, what's the first area?
Focus on areas of greatest need and disparities.
Exactly. And as she said, that's worth 20 points. That's worth 20 points. All right. And now what's the first bullet that's in that, Anna? Go ahead.
Extent to which applicant clearly defines the geographic boundaries and describes the community or communities and populations of focus.
Exactly. So what I'm going to propose to you is that in your narrative, you start with A, focus on areas of greatest need and disparity. And then you do a number 1. See, they're not numbered in this thing here, but you could intuit that this would be numbered. 1 is the first bullet. Number 2 is the second bullet. And the sub bullets under 2, I would label A, B, and C. So you're making it easy for the reviewer to find it. Okay, so so A is focused on the area of greatest need. The next bullet they're asking for, extent to which applicant clearly defines the geographic boundaries and describes the community or communities and population of focus. The first two words that should be written in here is the geography that we will serve is, boom, and you list it. So you're making it really easy. All right. Now, those of you that were on the boot camp, let me ask you this. Is this the only part in the RFP where the section called Focus on Areas Greatest Needed Disparities is discussed? If not, somebody, Anna, why don't you go ahead and put your virtual hand down, let somebody else answer. Give me the first part in the RFP where that topic is discussed. First page number. Anybody? Raise your virtual hand. Jason, go ahead.
Page 6.
Yeah, page 6. So page 6. So I want you to kind of put your hand there, a finger there, and then there's another place where it's discussed. What's another area page number that same topic is discussed? Somebody raise your virtual hand. Jason.
22.
All right. So we look at page 6 and we look at page 22. All right. So again, what we see, so that criteria, scoring criteria, is your roadmap. That's what you're going to be doing it. But in each of those 7 areas, they're discussed in 2 other places in the RFP. In this case, on page 6, on this page 22. And so the point on it is, when you're preparing your grant application, you want to be reading both subpoints of those, and because it's there is where they flush out the information that they're asking for in the scoring criteria. All right. And so, and the way that's structured is that each of those sections have those other areas where it's referred to. So you're responsible for providing all the information for everything that's in the funding announcement. You'll do it in the order of the criteria, answering those specific questions, referring to the other sections that have the same subtitle. Does that make sense? Any questions about that concept that I just described? If so, raise your virtual hand. If not, we'll move on. All right. So that's point number 3. Point number 4. Rule of thumb. Understand the scoring, which is clearly spelled out, then weight your pages accordingly. Okay, next trivia question for those of you that were in the on the boot camp. How many pages does the narrative what's the maximum number of pages that the narrative can be? Now, by the way, I actually answered that question about 6.7 minutes ago. So you can either do it by memory or you can point. Carl.
50.
Maximum number is 50. Carl, did you do that because you heard me say it, or do you remember seeing it in the document? And if so, can you tell me what page it's on?
I heard you say it.
Okay, good. Now, let's see if anybody can find it in the document. So thank you for paying attention, Carl. I appreciate that. Can anybody find it in the document? Okay, look at the table of contents. Oh, Jerry, go ahead. What page?
Oh, it's on page 20.
It's on
Section F.
page 20, section F. Look at that. Your project narrative must not exceed 50 pages. And then it says the following items do not count towards the project narrative page limit. The required forms, including those, project abstract summary, budget narrative, etc. So project narrative must not exceed 50 pages. Okay, so how many points did we get in this section A? How many points did that section get?
20.
Exactly. Jerry says 20. All right. So what we say is understand scoring, which is clearly spelled out, then weight your pages accordingly. So as a rule of thumb, if the maximum number of pages you can have in the whole application for narrative is 50, and this section has 20 points, then in general, you probably want to allocate about 10 pages to it. Okay. That's a rule of thumb as a starting point. Now, as you get into it, if you find out that, gee, you can answer that question in 6 pages, then you can free up time for other things. Another rookie mistake that many people make is they just start writing and they don't worry about page count. And they go through the first section and they're on a roll and they use up 20 pages there. Then they do the next section and they do another 20 pages there and they're up to 40 pages. Then they do the next section up to 60 pages. They've written 60 pages on an application that only has 50 pages length, and they've written 3/7 of the application. And at that point, many people give up. And they say, I've already spent too much time on it. Jerry, what are you going to say?
So that 50 pages, is that the absolute total, or is that like 50 with a cover page or an ending letter, or is it just 50?
So it's 50 for the narrative. Well, actually, turn back to page 20 again. And somebody read section G.
Oh, there.
Yeah, section G says your total application, that is project narrative plus appendices, must not exceed 100 pages. And then they list the same things that do not count towards that limit as well. And that's because there's some certain things that they're going to say can be in the appendices. For example, memorandums of agreement. That does not count against your budget narrative. Logic model does not. You can put that in the appendices. A work plan does not. Put that in the appendices. All right. So basically, here's what you'll probably end up doing, or what I typically, so I usually write these in a team environment. All right. So and I'm going to encourage each of you to do as well. Have a Google Sheet where you basically have to say, okay, I got 50 pages of narrative. I've got 50 pages of appendices. That's my maximum. And let's be counting how that's going to be used up. So in other words, gee, how many letters of agreement are we going to have? Okay, a page for each of those. So in grant applications, you have 2 scarce resources when it comes to grant applications. Number 1 is time. The clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. As a matter of fact, when is this application due? When is this application due?
April 18th.
April 19th.
Okay. Oh, wait, I heard 2 different dates. One was April 18th, one was 19th. What's correct?
18.
18. As a matter of fact, what time on April 18th?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. What time zone?
Eastern.
Eastern.
What happens if you click submit at 6:01 Eastern time?
Your host.
Yeah, your application will not get read. It just won't get read. So the deadline is the deadline. All right. So, and I say that to say that there's a lot of things that are like absolutes. That's one of them. Anyway, so back on scoring. If you've got you take a look at the number of sections, you look at the number of pages total, you multiply it out. And that's your starting point. That way, as you're writing it, you're constantly budgeting. So the 2 things I started to say, there's 2 things that you will always be in short supply of a grant application. Number 1 is time. And the second is almost always you'll be short on number of pages. You'll have to be budgeting against each, managing your process against each. All right. So that's point number 4. Point number 5. Take a minute. I'm taking a breath. Take a breath. It's a suggestion, number 5. Bold or underline, whatever works for you, everything that the funding announcement says they're looking for, or other key points, and then concentrate on those bolded or underlined parts as you're preparing your grant and or discussing the grant with others. This makes the process so much easier to get a handle on. What I typically do, I'm more proficient dealing with Microsoft Word than I am something in a PDF. So I typically will take this PDF, save it as a Word document, and then I've got the ability to bold things, underline things, make comments, like with questions, like, what do they mean by this? Or a comment that says, also referred to on page, like for example, on page 6, you might say, also referred to on page 22, and criterion on page 43. And so you want to, again, I really recommend saving it as a Word document and playing with it from there. Okay. Because without it, by the way, if you look at my handwritten version of it, what you'll see is I've got lots of underlines on the funding announcement, and underlines, stars, questions. You know, it's a working document. You would be working on it. Okay, good. All right, that's number 5. Number 6, I say consider starting with a logic model. I probably should have said consider using a logic model. This is a great way to summarize your entire application on one page. And in fact, they do not require a logic model in this grant application. But reading between the lines, they suggest it. It's not a requirement, but it's suggested. So what's a logic model? So a logic model is a pictorial diagram that on one page really explains your entire grant application. And so when I'm doing a narrative, when I get to the project approach section, what I will typically say is an overview of our entire grant project can be found on the logic model, which is an appendix X, and tell them where it is. Because what you want your logic model to do is that provides the overview of your entire project. And you want your reviewer to look at it so that they more clearly understand how it works. So what's a logic model? So a logic model is a way in which you basically typically will have 5 sections of information flowing from left to right. On the left, it's what are the resources and inputs? The second is what are the activities that you'll be accomplishing? The third is what are the outputs? And then what are the outcomes and what are the impact? And so the first way to look at it is the first 2 items, the resources and inputs, and the activities, is your planned work. And the next part of it is your intended results. And so flowing from left to right, if you look at resources and inputs, you say, okay, what resources are needed to operate your program? The next block is, okay, armed with those resources, now you can use them to accomplish your planned activities. So this is a list of the activities that you'll be performing. And what outputs is a way to say, if you accomplish your activities, then you'll deliver the amount of services that you intended. So this could be, we'll be teaching X number of classes, serving Y number of students, and X number of adults, and Z number of, so those are the amount of services that you are intending to provide. And what outcomes are, then if you accomplish the planned activities to the extent you intend, then your participants will benefit in certain ways. This will be, in a marriage course, they will learn better communication skills. They will learn conflict management skills. In this case, students will learn sexual risk avoidance skills. They will learn communication skills. They will learn relationship skills. And then impact says, if those benefits to the participants are achieved, then certain changes in the community might be expected to occur. In this case, you'd expect a change in the community to be a decline in the number of teen pregnancies, a decline in the number of sexually transmitted infections or diseases. So here is an example of a logic model. It's just kind of a relatively simple, straightforward one, not for this application, but for another project. And so your inputs, you have consumers and providers and people that pay. So in other words, health reimbursers, you got staff, you have external technical assistants. So those are your inputs. And there will be certain activities that occur. In this case, you'll have participation in the reform process. You have inclusive community decision-making. The outputs will be what's in the next box, and then outcomes and impact. So this is one format, and then here's another format. This one kind of goes from bottom up. Again, the same type of thing. Okay. Now, when we're working on in the grant writing bootcamp, we'll have more time to spend on logic models. So we're probably going to have a technical assistance call that's about, at least a third of the time on logic models. But the gist of it is, it's a structured, diagrammatic way that somebody can understand the entire project. And you have these in your handouts, so you'll be able to kind of look at them in more detail. And like I said, those in the grant writing bootcamp will have a chance to really go into it in more detail. All right, so that's number 6, is consider the possibility of using logic models. Number 7, this I just highly, highly recommend. Copy each criteria section, one page or section in a Word document, and then break each item into separate bullets. So again, if we look back on page 43, what we say is page 43, section A has 2 main bullets, and under the second main bullets, you've got 3 sub bullets. Okay, now that's a big picture. You're also going to want to look back through pages 6 and page 22 to see if there's some sub points you want to make sure that's covered in there. And if so, you may add it to the criteria just as a reminder. All right. Then the next point, try to estimate the point value of each bullet. That really gives you a good perspective on where you need to spend your time and helps you get into the mindset of the future grant reviewer, since that's likely going to be how their scoring sheet is going to look. And so their scoring sheet is going to list these 4 bullets, those actually 5 bullets. And next to each bullet will have an assigned weight that says, okay, and it may be in this case that, in this case, there's actually 4 things that they'll assign points to. And they may decide to award 5 points to each of those. Okay. And so the scoring sheet will have those 4 things and have the number 5 by each of them, if that's how the points get divided. And then the reviewer will read your response to each of these and decide, hey, do they earn all 5 points, or do they do a deduct? All right. So you're trying to estimate the point value of each bullet. That gives you a good perspective on where you need to spend your time and your real estate in writing the application. And then what you want to do is you want to write an appropriate response to each and every bullet. Answer each one completely in a space-sensitive way. I say see number 4 above. That's the one where it says allocate your real estate, your paper, depending upon the number of points that it has. Now, your first time through, you don't want to start off by writing paragraphs under each. Your first run through, you're going to have bullet points under it. So, for example, extent to which applicant clearly defines the geographic boundaries, describes the community or communities and population of focus. So your first time through, you're going to put a bullet point and say, my communities are these 5 counties, and you'll list them. And then you'll say, what are the population of focus? We're going to be low income or African American. So that's your first answer to it. And then you go down to it. Extent to which the applicant clearly demonstrates. The next thing is an understanding the current need of the communities and populations of focus. So that's the need of the community and need of the population of focus that places them at the highest risk for disparities related to teen pregnancy and STIs within the community. So you want to have bullet points like, how are you going to answer that? Or if it's going to be a table, you'd write table, which shows this. So what you're basically doing, your first run through, is you're providing an outline for your entire grant application. That's really important to outline it. And again, the pros will outline it. So I'm going to start writing answer to question number 1. Okay, I've written a bunch. Now I'll go on to question number 2. That's not going to work. You do the outline approach because you may find out that in a later criteria, it's going to relate back to something in this criteria. And so that's why you need to take a holistic approach to it. All right, so that's what we need by point number 7. All right. Point number 8. Assume no pre-existing knowledge on the part of the reviewers. Explain everything along the same point. The reviewers will not visit any website you refer them to. So you've got to include in your application everything you want your reviewers to consider. So what a rookie will do is say, in order to demonstrate our experience, please go to our website. The reviewers are actually forbidden to access the internet. All they can look at is the application. Sandy, could you bring me a water bottle, please? Thanks. There's partly used one in the freezer. Okay. And so you got to ask the question, who are the reviewers? Most of the time, reviewers are people just like you all that have some knowledge of the field, but they're not experts usually. Or if they're experts, they're only experts on a very limited part of it. And so you've got to explain everything. Just, define all the terms, explain everything. All right, next point. Whoa. 9, you got to clear your schedules to allow time for grant writing. It is a very time-consuming process, especially the figuring it out part. And so you've got to allocate enough time to do both parts of what I said was important in item number 1. If you remember in item number 1, I said there's 2 parts to a successful application. Number 1 is you've got to have a well-designed project, and the second is a well-written application. One thing that rookies do is they actually start writing too early. This is why I got to start writing. Well, first step is you got to understand what it is you're proposing. All right. So you've got to have enough time. You've got to have time to figure it out, design the intervention, and to do it in a well-written grant application. And my first bullet is people often confuse those 2 elements. And they start writing the application before they figured out their intervention. And that just turns out to be a waste of time and energy because you'll have to turn back and rewrite. So first, you've got to design a great intervention before you start writing a well-written grant application. All right, so that's point number 9. Point number 10, there's a question that frequently comes up that says, should we hire a professional grant writer? As a matter of fact, I've had a couple of you on this call that have asked that question within the last 24 hours. Dennis, we don't have time. Should we hire a professional grant writer? So I would like to throw out a scenario. I'm not saying you have to do it. So one option is you write the whole application yourself. By the way, all of you that are in the grant writing boot camp are well qualified to do that. I can say that because you've already done it. You've already written a well-written application. It's called your CMI fund grant application. That was a training mechanism to get you ready to do this grant application. So if you could do that, you could do this. This just is longer. It's just longer. All right. So that's option 1, is just write it yourself. The other option, though, is you could consider a hybrid approach in which, first bullet, you write out a first rough draft that contains all the information that the funding announcement is looking for. Remember what I was saying earlier? Your first step through is you're doing this outline where you're laying out, okay, the answer to this question, and you're answering it there. And so you could do that, and then if you want, you could let a professional grant writer clean up the structure and the format and the grammar. Okay. And for some of you, that might be the best approach to make. But I want to point out the next bullet, because this is a major mistake that many small organizations make, which is they put too much of the grant writing responsibilities on an outside grant writer. So they hire a grant writer and they say, okay, we're paying a grant writer, do a federal grant. And then they come and they say, well, what have you got designed? And you say, hey, that's on you. We're paying you $5,000. You figure it out. They'll shrug their shoulders, they'll walk away, and they'll do the best they can. $1,000, and your grant won't get funded. I mean, the odds of you getting funded under that scenario is well under 10%. Because think about it, you put too much of the grant writing responsibilities on that outside grant writer. But look at the next question. How in the world are they supposed to design your intervention? Think about it. They don't have your vision for where the organization is going. They don't have your understanding of your community, of your organization. And second point is they don't have your passion. Look, doing a grant application, especially something like this, that's a 5-year project, you're basically laying out your strategy for your organization for the next 5 years. Why in the world would you let some stranger you hired off Craigslist or eBay or wherever you find it or LinkedIn? Why would you let them design your project or your organization strategy? That's just foolish. So this hybrid approach really can work, but don't just turn the whole thing over. So I'm just going to point out the fact that we are going to run late on this. So it was scheduled for an hour. It's going to take longer than an hour. Some of you have to leave at the hour mark. Feel free to leave. Don't feel bad about leaving. It's perfectly fine. We scheduled for an hour. This is being recorded, which means that any of you that have to leave, in a few minutes, just simply send an email to Katie. Just say, hey, send me the link on this. And she'll be happy. As a matter of fact, some of you may decide to watch this another time because I've been told sometimes that being in one of my webinars is like drinking water out of a fire hose. So I just wanted to confirm, though, this is being recorded, right? Yes? Yeah, I thought so.
Yes, it is.
Make 100%. Yeah, perfect. All right, super. All right, so let's move on. Because look at, I said there's 21 points we want to make, and I've only covered the first 10. All right, so we're going to just keep moving. All right, point number 11. You've got to be proactive in the whole area of grant applications. Be proactive. And the point I want to make on this is most funding streams repeat on a forecastable schedule or cycle. Therefore, most surprises can be avoided by planning ahead. And a good case in point is this one on the TPP grant. You see, the last TPP grant actually is getting ready to expire. So it was actually very forecastable that this one would have come out. So a legitimate question would be, well, Dennis, if you knew this was coming out, why'd you wait until now to tell us about it? And my answer is because I violated point number 11, is I didn't look. And the reason for that is I've never received a TPP grant before. It's not something that's been really in my area of focus. However, when I read this particular RFP and I realized how well it mapped against what we're doing, community marriage initiatives, that's when I got excited. And I said, okay, let me resurrect the idea of the grant writing bootcamp. But in general, but I can already tell you that the next grant application for the Federal Healthy Marriage Grant is going to come out somewhere in the summer of 2025. Therefore, right now, everybody on this call, cancel all summer vacations you're planning to make in summer of 2025. You want to have all hands on deck so that when it gets announced, you're ready to go. Okay. Again, in this one, it's simply this grant opportunity wasn't on my radar screen. And that's why this has come up as what I call a surprise type of thing. But if you're proactive and look and know what your funding streams are, most of that can be eliminated. You can do a lot of the groundwork ahead of time and you're ready to roll, which ties directly into point number 12. If you expect your grant is likely to be a collaborative effort, begin building your collaborative well before the funding announcement is made. Now, you guys should be in good shape on this because in order to have received funding from the Community Marriage Initiative, you needed to have already put together a network of at least 10 churches that are already working with you. So you already have that network in place. And even if you don't have networks in the other places where you'll be providing services, you've got connections with people that have that network. All right, so that's 12. Point number 13. Encourage you to take a strategic approach to this whole category, what I'm going to call letters. I'm going to take a second to drink again. Different types of these documents use different labels and they're used in different ways. So I'm going to take the broad category, take a strategic approach to the topic of letters of support, memorandums of understanding, and/or memorandums of agreement. So a question is, how important are these documents? And so in this particular RFP, they actually make a distinction between the category they call letters of support, and they call it memorandums of agreement or letters of commitment. Can anybody who's read the entire 72 pages tell me what this grant says about letters of support? Now, while you're looking, let me throw this out to you. There's another really cool function that's in software these days. It's called the search function. So while I asked you to print this out, you could have an electronic copy. So if electronic copy in front of you, do a search on the word letters of support. So now read for me what it says about letters of support. Jerry, you unmuted, so go ahead and say.
Sure.
What page?
Let me
What page is
find
it on?
36.
All right, let's turn to page 36.
All righty. Do you want me to read the second paragraph or the first one?
Read what it says about letters of support.
Okay. Letters of commitment are not the same as letters of support. Letters of support are letters that are general in nature that speak to the writer's belief in the capability of an applicant to accomplish a goal or task. Letters of support may also indicate an intent or interest to work together in the future, but they lack specificity. You should not provide letters of support. You should not provide letters of support. Letters of support will not be considered during the review.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So in this,
so we don't need it.
In this application, they're saying don't provide letters of support. But that's the second paragraph, because the paragraph before is labeled number 4 that says memorandum of agreement, MOAs, and/or letters of commitment, LOCs. And it goes on to talk about it. So what they're basically recommending is that if you've got time to put them together, you should include memorandums of agreement and/or letters of commitment. Now, as I read this paragraph, I believe they're using those terms interchangeably. And the description on it is that basically, so an easy way to say it is memorandums of agreement and letters of commitment have a lot more meat and a lot more specificity. So they encourage those, but they don't encourage just the general letters of support in this particular grant application. And so that proves the point I'm making on the first bullet. It says, when you say how important are these documents? And so that answer will vary from grant to grant. What does the specific grant say about it? This says, well, don't provide letters of support. Go to the next bullet. So in the whole category of letters of support, or even memorandums of agreement, look at what it says. Rookies use all of those letters as fillers or have-tos. On the other hand, the pros use letters of support to make or support key elements of the grant proposal. So in other words, as you're writing your application, for example, there's a section in there that says, prove to us that you, or demonstrate that you have the ability to succeed in this grant opportunity. Well, you could write a memorandum of agreement in which the person who signs it testifies to the fact that they've worked with you in the past and know that you can do this type of thing because of their experience. But it's not enough just to have it hidden in a letter of agreement. Instead, you see in the next comment, you must refer to them, and I say or, and it's really and or, quote them in the narrative. And so you would then say, to build the case, so you could say, hey, this is what we say to prove that we have the proficiency. It's additional supported by what's said in the letter of commitment from Bishop Hernandez or whatever, or congressman or whatever, or, you know what I'm saying? So it's a way to introduce evidence, but it's not, but in order for it to count, you have to re-quote it in the narrative, because you cannot expect the reviewer is going to actually read all of letters of commitment. In fact, I will guarantee you that no reviewer will read, or actually only the most OCD reviewer will actually read all of your letters of support or memorandum of understanding or letter of commitment. So that's my point, is basically you can use them strategically. Also, please consider the communication value of asking for letters of support or letters of commitment. It gives you a legitimate reason for you to be having conversations and exposing your organization to important people that you probably want your organization to be exposed to. Is David from the Jacksonville office here? If so, raise your virtual hand and unmute yourself. He was on earlier. He may have
Yes, I'm
disappeared.
here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
Raise your virtual hand because I'm not seeing you. I'm hoping if you raise your virtual hand, you'll come to the top, but maybe it doesn't work that way. So I guess I have to find you. Hold on. Where are you, David?
My hand is raised.
Your hand is raised now. Let me go back and see if I can find you there. Yeah, it's not working that way. I was hoping that it would. There you are. There. Oh, are you, is your camera on? I mean, are you able to put your camera on? Perfect. All right.
I'm here now.
Perfect. I wanted you on screen because I want to retell for the group what I was talking to you yesterday about those surveys that we do in the Community Marriage Initiative Fund. So guys, think about it. When you submitted an application for the Community Marriage Initiative Fund, we required you to actually have those churches at least do 10 churches do a survey in which they laid out what their greatest needs were, what their program offerings were, and then what their levels of interest are, right? When you're applying for a grant, you can, it's easy to say, hey, can I?
Did he cut out for you?
Have them fill out that survey. And then when you go back, it says my internet connection is unstable. Are you guys able to hear me okay or not? Yes? Yeah, perfect. Okay, good. So you're actually able to take the information they've given you and then go back and say, hey, Pastor Bob, remember when you filled out this survey, you said that marriage enrichment was really important. Let me turn around and help you do it. So that's an explanation on how that works. All right. So that's what we're saying is be strategic as you're asking for things. How can you use the fact you're doing a grant application, help you build support for your project? All right, that's point number 13. All right, point number 14. Make sure you're satisfying all of the technical requirements of the grant application. So the first question is, are you a qualified applicant? If not, who do you know? What organization do you know that fits the requirement of a qualified applicant that you might partner with them? All right, so who can find what page number in the application they describe what a qualified applicant is? And by the way, you can either look at the table of contents to try to find it, or you can just do a search to see if those words come up. Actually, in this case, it may not show up on a search. I can see it on the table of contents. Anybody that has found who an eligible applicant is, go ahead and just call out your name so I can know you're ready to talk. Unmute yourself. Well, actually, I think raising virtual hands works. So once you know it, raise your virtual hand. Raise your virtual hand. Jerry, that's your real hand. Oh, to raise your virtual hand, at the bottom, you'll see a place that says reactions. You'll click on reactions and raise hand. Leanne. All right. Leanne, are you feel comfortable coming on camera, or are you shy today? It's okay if you're too shy. All right.
No, I'm
So-
fine. We just had kids in the house.
Sure.
Page 18.
What page is it on? Page 18.
Page 18.
Yeah. And again, you find it, you can look at it in the table of contents, section C, eligibility information, eligible applicants. And it says it's on page 18. You turn to page 18 and eligible applicants. So, Leanne, go ahead and read for me that first sentence under eligible applicants.
Any public or private profit or nonprofit entity located in a state, which includes one of the 50 United States, District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana
I'll stop you
Islands.
there. Yeah, that's okay. It goes on. Yeah, it goes on to a bunch of descriptions. So it's the first sentence is any public or private, that is profit or nonprofit entity located in these United States. Any entity. And then down below, it gives a bunch of other examples of what an entity is. Faith-based organizations are, public or private community-based, examples of eligible organizations. You look at those examples of eligible organizations and you go, huh, I think that any organization probably falls into one of those categories. That's what they mean by any public or private. So that lays out what you're eligible. So in other words, it's not an individual. It can't be an individual. It has to be an entity or an organization. All right, good. Section B, pay particularly close attention to such details as page count limitations, font size, margins, whether or not you do page numbering requirements. Yes, no, which ones? All right, who can tell me, find it for me? Again, raise your virtual hand on where that information is asked for in the NOFO. Raise your virtual hand. Well, I'll give you a hint. We found it earlier when we talked about the 50-page. Leanne, all right, Leanne's on a roll. What page number is that on?
I think it's on page 20. Is that right? Content and form of application submission.
Exactly. There you are on page 20. Letter E. Your project narrative section must be double spaced on the equivalent of 8.5 by 11 with 1-inch margins on all sides, top, bottom, left, and right, and font size not less than 12 points. Well, look at that. And then the next paragraph talks about it must not exceed 50 pages. All right. So what about page numbering? Do they want to be page numbered or not? And again, the easiest way to find that is do a search on page number. Just that in the document, do a search on that. Let me know who can find that.
They don't want you to number the pages.
What page are you reading from?
I read the video. I listened to the video. I got memorized most of it.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Well, can somebody find it in the NOFO?
Page 21.
Page 21.
Page 21.
Do
Let's
not
see.
number pages
Do not number
Or-
pages.
or table of contents.
Exactly. So my point is, you are responsible for understanding all the technical pieces of the pieces parts and put it in there. Good. Super. Thanks, guys. All right. Next one. The deadline is the deadline is the deadline. Don't mess around with it. What's the deadline on this grant application?
April 18th,
What time?
6 p.m. Eastern.
You got it. Don't mess with it. Don't mess with it. By the way, you're speaking to somebody, Richard Albertson and I were writing a grant application back, I think it was 7 years ago. And it was midnight at Eastern time. We were writing it in Central time. And I, Dennis Stoica, forgot about the different time zones. And we wrote an entire grant application that we submitted 1 minute late. And it was never read. It was never read. So don't do that. Don't do that. I've already done that mistake, so you don't have to. I've now spared you for that one. All right, that's number 14. Moving ahead. Number 15. Okay, be very careful of what I refer to as the cow factor. Now, by the way, many of you know that I've been in prayer over a good friend of mine who is having serious health problems. Patty Howell actually created this acronym, and she did it because I'm such a violator of it. So I'll read it. Be very careful of what we refer as the can of worms factor when tempted to make last minute revisions to your grant application. And so I'm a very creative type of person, and I just keep creating and creating and creating. And so I have a tendency that, a few days before the application is due, I'll come to Patty or whoever and say, oh man, I've got this great idea for this project. We need to do this. And Patty learned to look at me and she would just say, moo, moo, which meant is past the cow factor, meaning, and so what we say by can of worms is, if you open a can of worms, you got to make sure that you got enough time to put all the worms back in. Now in surgery, they say, if you open somebody up to do surgery, make sure you got enough time to complete the surgery and sew them back up. And so it is with this, is you've got to make sure as you're getting further along in writing up the grant application that you have to freeze the design and say, I'm sorry, I can't make any more changes at this point because we're just going to run out of time. So in
Is
Patty's,
Dennis frozen on your guys' end?
oh, really? Can you guys not see me? Was everybody able to hear what I said? Okay. So, okay. It looks like Jerry. Yeah, I think we're good. All right. Point number 16. And again, I really appreciate the fact that on this particular webinar, I'm choking up as I say this, that I actually get to get testimony, a shout out to Patty for this innovation, the cow factor. All right. Point number 16. It's so important. Understand what you want to get out of the project and make sure the final version of the project includes this. First bullet point, don't get caught up in just chasing dollars. Don't do mission drift. Make sure that what you're doing is something that you can get really excited about. So make sure you really want the grant you are applying for, really. And in fact, to be honest with you, when I write grant applications, I usually get so excited about the grant project that I'm submitting that I'll take a position that say, oh my gosh, if we don't get funded from the feds for this, how to raise money so we can do it anyway, because this project needs to be done. And that's the level of commitment and passion I really encourage all of you guys to be at when you're doing this. And if you get to the point and it's a few days to go and you're looking at your grant application and you go, I'm not sure I even want this grant, then don't submit it. Don't go chasing dollars. Make sure it feeds into your strategy, your strategic vision for your organization. On number 17, if you're going to get involved in grant writing, I say play full out. Along those lines, next bullet, 100 points is the only acceptable target to be going after. That's your goal, is to score 100. Because I tell you what, if you consistently score 100, you will consistently get funded. I've actually never heard of anybody that had an application that scored 100 that didn't get funded. And I will have to say, the majority of federal grant applications I've ever submitted or co-authored have scored 100. The majority of them do. And that's the level of detail you need to be operating at. That's the level to play at. And by the way, it's so worth it because you put so much time into this application. I would much rather do half the applications that I get 100 at than double my applications that I score 90 at. Because the probability of you getting funded at 100 is close to 100%. And the probability of getting funded if you have a 90, 50-50. So honestly, why would you try for anything else? Go for the 100. Go for the 100. All right, that's point 17. On to point 18. All right, good and bad grant applications are really easy to identify. Therefore, consider having yours practice scored by 2 or 3 of your friends or associates. So along those lines, don't plan that you're going to write this thing and have it finished just the day before it's due. No, really, your goal should be try to get it pretty much done at least a week before. And then look at people in your network, create a scoring sheet for them, have them score it for you, and tell them to be honest. Tell them, hey, I want you to be brutally honest. If I'm not answering a question, tell me. Ideally, you want to do that about a week before, so you've got time to make the revisions. Those of you that are in this grant writing bootcamp, you now know, have that designed into this process. It's designed into this process. All right, point number 19. Please consider this webinar to be just the beginning of a new learning process around the areas of grant writing. Along those lines, take advantage of every opportunity you can to learn about grant writing going forward. Don't think that, oh, I participated in 90 minutes of Dennis's training, I'm an expert now. No, you're not. You now know more than you did 75 minutes ago, hopefully, but continue to learn. And so along those lines, participate in multiple grant writing workshops so you can hear other people's perspective on it. Point number 2, seriously consider applying for what I call a non-critical grant, just for practice. Just for practice. You'll learn a lot. Next point, notice this is in all caps. Always request your scored applications that will come with comments from the review panel, and then study those comments carefully, whether or not you're awarded a particular grant. That's how you learn. That's how you get better. Number 20, seriously consider getting yourself onto a grants review panel. That's a great learning experience. So please, please do this. Look for opportunities to volunteer to score applications. The federal government is frequently looking for reviewers. Some local foundations are as well. So looking at it from the inside out will literally transform your understanding and perspective on the grant writing process. I have a note that says, hey, during the question and answer period, someone please ask me about an upcoming opportunity to do this. All right, let's go on to point number 21. Point number 21 is very simple. Get in the game. Get in the game. Because the only way to learn how to be an effective grant writer is to actually write and submit grant applications, and then learn from the results. And the next sentence is 100% guaranteed. You are absolutely guaranteed to not be awarded 100% of the grants you don't apply for. So the question I asked you to ask me during the question and then we go to question and answer is, the question I ask is, hey, Dennis, what did you want me to ask about an upcoming opportunity to be on a grants review panel? So I'm going to come off sharing now. I think, here we go. Come off sharing. So those of you that are participating in the grant writing bootcamp have this designed in. And so everybody knows, as we've heard, the application is actually due on April 18th. But we're asking everybody in this grant writing bootcamp to have their first draft ready by close of business or end of the day on April 12th. So all of the people working on it will have their grant applications first draft due by the 12th. April 13th, everybody on it is going to be volunteering to review and score applications from the other people, from some other people in the grant writing bootcamp. But we can make that same opportunity available to everybody on this call, that even if you're not participating in the grant writing bootcamp as a author of the application, I'll extend the invitation that if you would like to practice review several of these applications, we'll include you on one of the grant review panels. And I really highly recommend that you seriously consider saying, hey, I'd like to do that, because you'll learn so much from that process. If you're interested in doing that, send me an email. It says I'm interested. But in order to do that, you will need to block out complete all of April 13th. I want to make sure I'm using my dates correct on that. Yes, the first draft are due April 12th. And if you're going to be on the grant review panel, block out all of April 13th, because you're going to spend the entire day reading 3 or 4 grant applications that are submitted by other people on this call. And you'll be reviewing them, scoring them, and then you'll get together with other people that are doing that on the same grant application you have and panel it. So what we're doing is we're giving you the experience of that you would get if you were on a federal grant reviewer. And this honestly is one of the best learning experiences that you can take advantage of. So I highly recommend it. You'll be doing a service for yourself but also for the people you're giving feedback on. One other thing, I invited everybody that was already funded to participate in this grant writing bootcamp. Some of you may decide that you don't want to actually submit a grant application. If that's true, you have another way to participate, and that is you could participate by doing what I call a shadow application. And what the shadow application is just walk along those people that are doing the full application and get to the part of actually doing just the sample rough draft, of doing the bullets on it. All right. But participate in all of these group calls, so you're understanding what people are going through. You're not going to take the arduous point of actually writing up the full application, but you'll come a long way. And then you'll want to participate as a panelist on it. So that's a way that you'll get value, even if you're not actually going to be writing and submitting the full application. All right. So I've now officially gone 22 minutes over the time frame. People on my staff smile because it's not the first time they've experienced Dennis going past time. So I see I do have a chat from Ray. Let me see. Yeah, okay. So Ray, if you don't mind, could you send that to me in an email rather than just on a text? Because I'll lose it on a text. And the other folks that are from your organization have my email address. I'll mention it. It's djstoica@gmail.com. But anybody on the group will be able to give that to you. Super. All right. So raise your virtual hand if you've got questions. Actually, I'm going to go to the chat and see if there's any questions in the chat. There will probably be something like, okay. Oh, first one from Carl. You may want to adjust your camera and computer. Gee, I wish I'd read that a long time ago. All right. Hopefully I did. All right. Katie has some addresses. Okay. Oh, Anna says he stole my answer. Let me see. One of the criteria points is demonstrated current commitment to reducing teen pregnancy and STI. Could you please speak to the importance and point value of that, especially those who are not currently working in this field? Okay, so it's current D, right? So let me see, what page is that on? D. Yeah, so D, second point, says extent to which organization demonstrates capacity, experience, and expertise. Am I talking about? No, you're saying E1. I'm sorry, E1. E1.
Hey, Dennis, it is D.
D1.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying D2. D2, yeah. Extent to which the organization's capacity, experience, and expertise to execute their proposed project. Well, actually, that doesn't talk about commitments. I wonder if it's something. Oh, no.
Well,
Okay. Point one, I'm sorry. Extent to which the organization has demonstrated a positive working relationship and commitment to advance equity in adolescent health and reduce disparities in unattended teen pregnancy and STIs in the focus community. So if you don't have that within your specific organization, what you do is you borrow it from other people that borrow that. Hold on a sec. Cindy, could you call Violet? She's up front. Okay, hold on a sec.
Violet,
Come here. Okay, great. So it's possible that your named organization might not have experience in there. So then what you do is you've partnered with somebody that does have that, and you borrow that as part of their credibility. Okay, and you do it in a way that you're just basically appropriating that through a partnership. And again, as we're working through the boot camp, we can talk about that in more detail. Good. Jerry, you raised your hand.
Yeah, and so the application deadline is April 18th at 6 p.m. Eastern, but when can we reasonably expect to hear back on yay or nay on that? And also, I noticed that the date was July 1st of when, let's see, what was the wording on that? The anticipated start date. Does that mean that a distribution will begin in July 1st for the winning or the awarded applicants?
Yeah, so I did not see in here It may be there, but I don't remember seeing in there the date in which they will inform people. However, in other grants, they would typically inform you on June 30th.
Okay. And then how soon after that do you expect to get distributions so that you can start rolling out your plans and be getting funded and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and so this project actually has a requirement of a 6-month planning period. So during the first 6 months, they don't expect you to be teaching any classes. You can hire staff, you can be working with your network, you can be deciding which curriculum you can be offering. But to answer your question, you could actually, once you submit the required paperwork, start doing drawdowns, July 1st or 2nd.
Okay, so I did read where that there's a planning period, and that was a kind of another question that I hadn't mentioned. But so you can be getting funded and hiring, like you said, even though you haven't actually rolled the truck out to the facility yet. But you can
Absolutely.
start paying people. You can start giving
Yes.
deposits and whatnot. Okay.
Yes.
And do they what is it, like
actually,
10% at a time, or 25%, or the whole thing, or
No,
how do they
not
do
at
that?
all. So this is all on a cost reimbursement basis. So as you spend money, you'll get reimbursed for it. And they'll actually do it in it's cost reimbursement with a cash hold on a sec. Hey, Sandy.
Yes.
Yeah. You know me and noise, huh? Thanks. So
The reimbursement process.
yeah, so Sandy, could you call him back, please? One of the requirements is the money must flow out of your account within 72 hours of the money flowing into your account.
Okay.
Okay, so what organizations typically do, so Live the Life does monthly drawdowns based upon the expenditures. Live the Life has cash cushion that they can do that. In California Healthy Relationships, California, they typically did advances like once a week.
Okay. And so do they backfill you first? Like if we had $10,000 of expenses that we were getting ready to pay out on the 31st, would they give you a drawdown before you spent that, or would it be after?
No, you could do it beforehand. And so the way the drawdowns work is it's all electronic. You submit and you say, I want to draw down on, in that case, April 30th. And so the money will hit your account. And what they're saying is that they do not want you to be banking a lot of money before spending. They don't want to be earning interest on it, but the money can go in your account. They say up to 3 days before the money actually goes.
Okay. And so it sounds like they want to ensure that you spend all of it before the end of the term.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.